My name is Marissa. I'm 46 years old, and after decades of running from God, I died on the floor of my own home and woke up face to face with Jesus. I grew up in a middle-class home that, from the outside, looked perfectly fine. My mom made sure we were at church every single Sunday. I can still hear the hymns echoing in my head at night as a little girl, her voice singing soft and steady while I lay half asleep on the pew. My father was there too, but never really present. He was polite, distant, and I always felt like he never truly saw me. I was the quiet one among my siblings, sensitive, always trying to be the good girl. But being quiet meant I was overlooked. By the time I hit my teens, I wanted to be noticed, so I started sneaking out, drinking with friends, rebelling against every rule. By my early 20s, church felt like something I'd grown out of, and I left it behind. On the outside, I looked responsible as I got older. I worked steady jobs, paid the bills, raised my kids, but inside I was insecure and restless. I wanted more out of life, but every time I reached for it, fear of failure pulled me back. I married young, hoping love would fill the void. But by my 30s, betrayal shattered that dream. My husband cheated, and the divorce nearly broke me. Now, years later, I was a single mom with 2 nearly grown kids, a daughter in her 20s, a son in his late teens. I worked as an administrative coordinator in a logistics company. Day after day, I sat in a gray cubicle under buzzing fluorescent lights, listening to gossip swirl around the office. It drained me. I knew I was wasting my potential, but I didn't have the courage to change. At night, I tried to quiet the emptiness. A glass of wine to relax turned into 2, sometimes 3. Netflix marathons. Endless scrolling on my phone. I used to love sketching, but the pencil sat untouched for years. Sometimes I bought self-help books, hoping they'd spark something in me. But they sat half-read on the nightstand, just like my Bible. I told myself I was fine. I told myself I'd come back to God later. But deep down, I knew I was drifting further away. It was late evening, the kind of quiet where the house feels heavier than usual. The only light came from a single candle on the counter, its small flame bending with the faint current from the air vent. My son was upstairs, his laughter and video game chatter faint through the floorboards. My daughter was out with friends. I was alone with the silence. I poured myself another glass of wine, deep red swirling in the stemmed glass, catching the flicker of candlelight. I told myself, as always, just one more to unwind, but I knew it wasn't just to relax. It was to numb, to blur the edges of another day that felt wasted. I lifted the glass to my lips, and then it struck. Sudden, merciless. A searing pain ripped through my chest. Not a dull ache, not a warning, but a violent tearing that stole the breath from my lungs. My hand trembled, my fingers losing their grip. My vision fractured into shards of color. The refrigerator's hum, something I had never noticed, roared in my ears like machinery. The waxy sweetness of the candle pressed into my nose. My pulse thundered, then skipped, then scattered. Time didn't just slow, it broke apart. The glass slipped from my hand, turning in the air as though in slow motion. I watched it tilt, wine spilling in an arc, splattering across the counter and dripping down in dark rivulets. It looked like blood, my blood, spreading across tile. My knees buckled. The edge of the counter brushed my hip as I collapsed, my body folding against the cold, unyielding floor. The impact sent a shock through me, but the greater terror was what followed. My body wouldn't obey me. I tried to push myself up, but my arms felt like lead. My mind raced. This can't be it. Not here. Not like this. Fear surged up first, sharp and primal, but then came regret. Thick, suffocating regret. For wasted years, for bitterness I had clung to, for prayers I had put off, for telling myself I'll come back to God later. The world dimmed. My last thought was a desperate plea that wasn't even spoken aloud, only echoing in my head like a scream. Not like this. I thought I had more time. And then, darkness. The next moment, I was no longer inside myself. I was staring at me, my own body, twisted unnaturally on the cold kitchen tile. My arm was bent under me, my blouse wrinkled and damp from where the wine had splattered. Strands of hair clung to my cheek, and my mascara, already smudged from crying earlier that day, had streaked into dark lines across my skin. I looked pitiful, fragile, lifeless. The wine had crawled across the counter drop by drop until it reached the edge and began to fall, one crimson bead at a time. It dripped toward my limp hand, pooling around my fingertips as though mocking me. The sight made my stomach twist. It was symbolic, like the very life I had wasted was now spilling out, irretrievable. Faint noises drifted down from upstairs. My son's video game, his muffled shouts of excitement, the clatter of digital gunfire, the soundtrack of teenage distraction. Normal life was still happening. He had no idea his mother's body was sprawled lifeless beneath him. Everything else was muted, as if I were submerged underwater. The ordinary hum of the refrigerator thundered in my ears like machinery. The flicker of the candle burned unnaturally bright, its flame too sharp, too real. The colors of the kitchen, the beige tiles, the pale yellow walls, even the shadow under the counter, looked exaggerated, like someone had turned up the contrast on the world. And then there was me, gray, washed out, like I was already fading from it all. A raw, primal horror surged through me. My mind screamed, "That's me. That's my body. I'm dead." The words weren't spoken aloud, but they echoed inside me with the force of a cannon. Panic gripped me. I tried to move, to scream, to somehow slip back into that shell lying on the floor. But I couldn't. My hands weren't hands anymore. My voice wasn't a voice. I was both weightless and trapped, hovering in a reality I couldn't control. And then, without warning, something began to pull me upward, not yanking or tearing, but steady, sure, irresistible. It was like being caught in a current, a tide that lifted me from the heaviness of earth and carried me higher. The ceiling didn't just fade, it melted away like mist. Above me opened a brilliance, an overwhelming radiance that should have seared my eyes but didn't. It was light, pure and alive, saturating everything with a presence that felt personal, almost magnetic. My fear trembled before it. I was being carried into something greater than myself, into someone greater, and there, standing before me, was Jesus. It's almost impossible to describe because he wasn't just light, and he wasn't just a man. He was love itself, standing in a form I could see. Radiance poured from him, yet it didn't hurt my eyes. It soothed them, like the first dawn after a lifetime of darkness. His robe shimmered pure and white, but it wasn't fabric like anything on earth. It was alive, flowing with a holiness that seemed to breathe. His face. Oh, his face. It was both familiar and overwhelming, as though I had known him my whole life, yet was seeing him for the very first time. It was like my soul had always carried his imprint, and only now remembered where it truly belonged. And then he spoke. His voice was unlike anything I've ever heard on earth. It wasn't just sound. It was truth itself, weaving through me, resonating in places deeper than my bones. It was gentle, tender like a whisper, yet at the same time it thundered with a power that felt like it could shake the heavens. Every syllable carried eternity. The first thing he said was, "Marissa, I never left you." Just those words, nothing more. And yet those words undid me completely. That was it. I broke. The years of pretending, the walls I had built, the pride that kept me distant, all of it shattered in an instant. I fell at his feet, sobbing uncontrollably. My whole being poured out shame and regret, the wasted years, the empty nights with a wine glass in hand, the prayers I never prayed, the times I chose everything but him. My apologies stumbled out in fragments. I'm sorry, I failed you. I wasted so much, but I couldn't finish them. My voice cracked under the weight of my guilt. But then, he moved. He reached down and his hand touched me. The moment his fingers brushed beneath my chin, it was like fire and tenderness at once, an impossible mix of strength and compassion. Gently, he lifted my face toward his, and when his eyes met mine, everything stopped. There were no excuses left, no arguments, no defenses. I was fully seen. Every hidden thought, every secret shame, every scar and failure, it was all exposed before him. And yet, in that same gaze, I was fully loved. The love in his eyes wasn't soft pity. It was fierce, burning, unstoppable. It was the kind of love that said, I know you. I've always known you, and I still choose you. In that moment, I realized something I had missed my entire life. His love had never depended on my perfection, my performance, or my worthiness. His love had been constant. Through my rebellion, through my broken marriage, through every night I drowned myself in shame, he had never left. And all I could do was weep in awe, undone by the reality that the very one I had pushed away had never stopped loving me. In his presence, it was as though time itself bent open. There were no walls, no screens, no pages turning, just truth laid bare before me. My life began to unfold like a film, but sharper, heavier. I didn't just watch my life. I felt it. Every word, every silence, every choice was alive again, pressing on my heart. I saw myself as a little girl, maybe 6 years old, my tiny hand clutching my mother's as we walked into church. The hymns swelled around us, and my heart was soft, so open, so ready. I remembered how safe it felt in those pews, like heaven was closer when I was a child. Then the scene shifted. I was holding up a crayon drawing to my father, my face bright with pride, waiting for him to notice. He glanced at it, barely nodded, and went back to his newspaper. That cold dismissal didn't just sting. It etched something into me, a quiet lie that I wasn't enough. And I could see how that wound had lingered, shaping years of insecurity I didn't even know I carried. The scenes rolled on. I was a mother now, older, tired, lines of stress on my face. I saw myself snapping at my kids after a long day, my voice sharp, my daughter's eyes falling to the floor, my son retreating in silence. The memory sliced me open. But then another moment came. I was sitting on my daughter's bed, her face streaked with tears after a breakup. I wrapped my arms around her and whispered comfort until she finally fell asleep against me. I saw myself pacing by the window late at night, waiting for my son to come home safely, relief washing over me when he finally walked through the door. The contrast of it all, the love and the failures, tore me apart. Then came the hidden things, the quiet acts of kindness no one ever saw, slipping money into a charity box, staying late to help a struggling coworker, forgiving my ex more times than he deserved. Those mattered. Jesus showed me they mattered more than I ever realized. But I also saw the shadows, the lies I told myself again and again. I'm fine. I'll pray tomorrow. God understands. I deserve this glass of wine. I'll get serious about him one day. I saw how those excuses stacked up like bricks, walling me further from him. In that place, there were no excuses, no pretending, only truth. And the truth was devastating. I had wasted so much of my life, time I could never get back. The weight of it crushed me. My knees buckled and I fell before him sobbing. The tears weren't just tears. They felt eternal, like they seeped into the very floor of heaven itself. Through choked cries, I pleaded, I'm sorry, Lord. Please forgive me. Please. And yet even in that brokenness, I could feel his gaze on me. Not a gaze of condemnation, but of love so fierce it undid me all over again. Then, he showed me what was to come. It wasn't like watching a movie. It was as if my soul was taken into moments that hadn't happened yet, but were already alive in his sight. Each vision carried a weight, like truth pressing directly into my spirit. The first vision opened, and I found myself standing in the living rooms of countless families. The lights were dim, the silence heavy. Each person, mothers, fathers, children, sat in the same room, yet they were worlds apart. Their faces glowed with the pale light of their screens, eyes fixed downward, thumbs scrolling endlessly. The father ignored the daughter beside him. The mother never looked up. Even children, so small, so innocent, were lost in the endless pull of glowing devices. My heart broke as I watched. I wanted to shout, to shake them awake, but they didn't even notice each other anymore. Then I heard him speak. They have forgotten one another. Love grows cold where attention is stolen. The words pierced me. I felt the ache of his heart, the grief of a father watching his children trade connection for emptiness. The vision shifted suddenly. Now I was above great cities, and they began to tremble beneath my feet. Skyscrapers swayed, fires burst out across blocks, entire streets split open. Sirens wailed, but they were drowned out by the roar of collapsing walls. Economies fell like dominoes. Leaders stood at podiums shouting, pointing fingers, making promises. But their words carried no power. I could feel the fear in the air, the chaos pressing in. And again, his voice filled the trembling scene. The towers of man will fall. Only those who stand on my word will remain. The weight of his words made me tremble. Everything built on pride, on greed, on human strength. It was crumbling. Nothing could stand except his truth. Then the scene shifted again, and this time, light broke through. I saw stadiums filled with people, not for sports, not for entertainment, but for prayer. Thousands gathered, kneeling, crying out to God. In homes, families huddled together with open Bibles, tears streaming as they sang songs of worship. And most striking of all, it was young people who were leading. Teenagers, children, college students, voices rising like trumpets, singing with a purity and fire that shattered the darkness around them. It wasn't polished or professional. It was raw, desperate, unstoppable, and his voice thundered above the worship. My spirit will not be silenced. I will call them back. At that moment, my chest burned with both fear and hope. I trembled at the shaking cities. I wept over the families lost in their distractions. But when I saw the revival, when I heard the voices of the young rising up like flames in the night, hope like fire filled me. It was unstoppable. It was real. And I knew then. He was showing me not just what the world would face, but what I had to carry back with me. In that place, standing before him, I felt like a child again, small, ashamed, desperate. My heart spilled out in broken words. Please, don't send me back. I failed. I can't face it. I wasted everything. I wasn't who I should have been. My children deserved better. You deserved better, and I ruined it. Please, just let me stay here. The words came out in sobs, the kind that shake your whole body. I clung to his feet as if my very soul could anchor itself to him. I didn't want to return to the pain, the regrets, the ordinary life that felt so gray compared to this. Here, in his presence, there was only peace, only wholeness. I thought, how could I ever go back to that broken world when I finally seen the one my soul longed for? But he looked at me. Oh, how he looked at me. Not with disappointment, not with scolding, but with that same piercing love that undid me over and over again. His eyes were fire and tenderness all at once, and his words sank into me like living water. Marissa, you are not a failure. You are mine, and you will tell them what you have seen. You will live, and you will show them I am real. It wasn't said like a suggestion. It was a commission, a calling, but not the kind that stood behind pulpits or wore titles. This was more intimate, more direct. It was for me, for my children who had seen me at my lowest, for my co-workers who whispered about me in cubicles, for every broken person I would brush shoulders with. I understood in that moment. I wasn't being sent back as a preacher. I wasn't being given a stage. I was being sent as evidence, living, breathing proof that Jesus is alive, that his mercy reaches even the most wasted years, even the most scarred hearts. And though part of me still wanted to beg to stay, a deeper part, touched by his love, realized this was mercy. He wasn't just giving me another chance. He was entrusting me with a message that could shake someone else awake. With tears streaming, I whispered, "If you send me, I'll go. If you ask me to speak, I'll speak. Just help me not waste it again." And he smiled. I can't describe it, but that smile felt like heaven itself bending close. The next moment, it felt like I was being pulled backward through a tunnel, like leaving warmth for cold, leaving brilliance for dimness. My chest seized, my lungs screamed for air, and suddenly, I broke the surface. I gasped, loud and desperate, like someone who had been underwater too long. My eyes flew open, and harsh fluorescent light pierced them. The brilliance of heaven was gone, replaced with frantic movement, beeping machines, and the smell of latex gloves and sweat. Paramedics were crowded around me, their faces locked in focus. One was pressing hard on my chest, another adjusting something by my arm. Their voices overlapped in a blur until one cut sharp and clear. "We got her back." I blinked, dazed, and the blur of motion parted just enough for me to see a face leaning over me. It was my son. His cheeks were streaked with tears, his eyes wide in shock and terror. His lips trembled as he whispered, "Mom." That word broke me. I wanted to hold him, to tell him everything, but all I could do was croak out the truth that was burning inside me. The first words that tore from my mouth weren't planned. They weren't polished. They were pure fire from my chest. Jesus is real. I saw him. The room went still for a heartbeat. My son's tears spilled harder, but his eyes searched mine like he wanted to believe every word. One paramedic froze, his hands hovering midair. He glanced at the others, then leaned closer. I saw something soften in his face as he whispered under his breath, words not meant for me but still caught in the air. "I believe her." Another paramedic shook his head slightly, but even he couldn't mask the way his eyes lingered on me, as though something about my words unsettled him. Meanwhile, my son clung to my arm, his tears falling onto my sleeve. His grip was tight, almost desperate, as if letting go might mean losing me again. The machines beeped. The paramedics resumed their motions. But beneath the chaos, there was a holy hush, like heaven itself was still echoing in that room through the words I had spoken. And in that moment, revival didn't look like a stadium. It looked like my boy's tear-streaked face, a paramedic whispering faith, and the undeniable presence of God lingering in the air of my living room. That night changed everything. There was no going back to who I was. The first thing I did when I walked back into my kitchen was stare at the half-empty bottle of wine still sitting on the counter. For years, it had been my escape, my comfort, my crutch. But now, looking at it felt like staring at a snake that had once coiled itself around my life. Without hesitation, I picked it up, unscrewed the cap, and poured it all down the sink. I watched the dark liquid swirl and vanish, and with it, a chapter of my life was buried. The same happened with the shows I used to drown myself in, those endless hours of meaningless entertainment. I opened my streaming accounts, deleted them one by one, and sat in the silence that followed. For the first time in years, the silence didn't scare me. It felt holy. That night, I dropped to my knees on the living room carpet. My body still felt weak. My chest still ached from the compressions. But my spirit was alive, and I prayed. Not out of guilt, not because I felt like I had to, but because my heart was bursting with love. It was clumsy, broken, unpolished prayer, but it was real. I held my son tighter than I ever had before. He didn't understand everything I tried to explain, but he felt it. I saw it in the way he clung to me, like he was afraid I'd vanish again. Later, I called my daughter. As soon as she answered, the words poured out in sobs. I told her how much I loved her, how sorry I was for all the years of distance, how grateful I was that God gave me more time with them. She cried too, and for the first time in a long while, we felt close again. In the months that followed, the ripple of that night spread. At work, where gossip and stress used to rule my days, I quietly began inviting a few women to pray with me during lunch breaks. What started with 2 of us grew into a small circle, and eventually into a weekly prayer group that became a lifeline for many. I began journaling every vision, every whisper, every lesson Jesus had given me in that encounter. Pages filled up quickly. Tears smudged some of the ink, but I knew I was preserving a testimony not just for myself, but for my children, and maybe even for generations after me. When I finally gathered the courage to share my story at church, I shook with nerves. But the moment I spoke his name, it was like fire filled my chest. The shame of my past dissolved as I declared what I had seen: Jesus alive, real, and calling his people back. Soon after, I shared in recovery groups, in living rooms, with friends who thought they were too far gone. And time again I saw tears. I saw hope. I saw people stirred the way I had been. I am not the same. The insecure, self-absorbed woman who once lived for the approval of others is gone. That version of me died on the kitchen floor the night my heart stopped beating. Now, every day I wake up with one desire: to live for him, to love my children fiercely, to speak boldly, to be unashamed. Because once you've looked into the eyes of Jesus, the only opinion that matters anymore is his.